He was an author. He's a psychohistorian, but he's also quite an activist. He's very direct about it. His vision and his work was directed to avoiding future such conflicts.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to the Struggle Video News. 460 unarmed activists were seized by heavily armed Israeli Zionist troops as they stopped the global Sumud Flotilla. The flotilla Twitter account, Global Sumud F, reported on October 4th. Of 460 abducted flotilla passengers, 331 have been located, 4 deported, and 127 remain unconfirmed. All known detainees are held in Ketziot prison with reports of degrading treatment. Ketziot is infamous for its degrading treatment of Palestinians. Here, the heroes have their hands up. On that Twitter feed, there were a series of pre-recorded messages that passengers had created to be shown in event of their abduction. Here's one.
My name is Frances Cummings and I come from the UK. If you're watching this video, I have been kidnapped by the IOF against my will and taken to Israel. Tell my government to end its complicity with Israel and bring me home. Stop the genocide.
The capture of the boats caused fury in many places around the world. Here's a demonstration in Mexico. But that was nothing compared to what happened in Italy. Dropsite News reports over 2 million people across Italy rallied in more than 100 cities on Friday as the country's largest union staged a nationwide general strike in solidarity with Gaza and the global Sumud Flotilla. In Rome, there were an estimated 300,000 in the capital in demonstrations. In Spain, there were large student strikes. And this bonus, because the Israeli pirate navy concentrated on the flotilla, Palestinian fishers took advantage of this and took part in a banned activity, fishing.
ابو عبد الله هذا ايه بس ولا يحبط وين يوسف البطة يوسف ايوه ما شاء الله لا والله هم الساعات طلع فوق بتلاقي يوسف يا رقم بالمخيم هات الامر كامل.
And new boats are on their way to Gaza. This one, the Conscience, has over 90 people on board. This is a picture a week before the flotilla's capture, and it's wonderful. It's of 100,000 people in Berlin, Germany, marching for Palestine. Germany is a country where the police can beat you up for waving a Palestinian flag. But these Germans are not intimidated. This kind of protest and disruption is the real deal. We wish that appeals to politicians and the UN would get things done. But frankly, they've gotten nothing accomplished. People power is in the streets. As we record, Hamas has announced that it proposes to give up all the hostages and stop its governing of Gaza and have a group of Palestinian technocrats take over. This, in fact, is a long-standing Hamas position. However, it did not agree to other parts of the Trump-Netanyahu demands that it give up all its weapons, tunnels, etc. Amazingly, President Trump tweeted that Hamas is serious about peace and has called for Israel to stop the bombing. We'll see what develops. Of course, it's no time for us to let up on protests. This is a protest by Israelis who hate the war. They blocked the way between 48 Palestine and Gaza until they were arrested. A few actually made it into Gaza for a few feet. They weren't invaders, but siege breakers. Last week, Jewish Voice for Peace New Haven held a pedal for Palestine. Some 40 people bicycled to 6 locations in New Haven to dramatize what is happening in Gaza. They started at Wilbur Cross High School, highlighting the total destruction of educational buildings in Gaza. They then went to the WTNH TV station, where they tried to get the TV station to notice the murder of hundreds of Palestinian journalists. They biked to Yale New Haven Hospital, where they talked about Gaza hospitals in ruins, and the torture of medical workers. They traveled to Hill Farm and spoke about how Israel has destroyed 90% of the farmland, and finally to the Canal Dock Boathouse on Long Island Sound, where they explain the meaning of the slogan "From the River to the Sea," the words that Zionists raise fear about in their propaganda. Of the riders, the oldest was 90 and the youngest was 5. You heard it, 5. 3 observers walked with the little one as she pedaled the entire route. Congratulations to them all. Ending this section with an actual screen grab of an article in Haaretz. It shows how the genocide is hated everywhere, even in nudist camps. The poet Mosab Abu Toha posted a video and wrote, "Why is no one doing anything to stop this? This is a new video that shows a Israeli terrorist quadcopter drone burning a tent in Gaza City. Do you know nearly impossible to find a tent in Gaza?" The company that made the quadcopter is not known at this time, but it very well could be Elbit. Connecticut's treasury has millions of dollars invested in Elbit, as do many other states. Mosab Abu Toha was one of the speakers at a fundraiser for Palestine in Town Hall in Manhattan on September 21st. This is a short that we made at the time. On September 21st at famous Town Hall in New York, 1,000 people gathered for a fundraiser for Inara and heard Mosab Abu Toha, Viet Thanh Nguyen, Hannah Lilith Asadi, Hala Alyan, Sima Jelani, Nan Golden, John Freeman, and Mahmoud Khalil. 4 days later, one of his cousins, His wife and 4 small children were slaughtered. Now, some very good news. A federal judge in Boston issued a devastating opinion. In a 171-page report, he said the arrests of Palestinians by the federal government for opposition to Israeli genocide were illegal, that anyone in residence in the U.S. has the same right to free speech. Another federal judge, this one in Tennessee, said that acts of the Trump administration against Abrego Garcia were not acts of law, but likely acts of vindictiveness. The Times subheadline said it was an astonishing rebuke to the Justice Department. The rest of today's program will be a section of my interview with Paul Hodel about the death of Robert J. Lifton. It's September 22nd, 2025. I'm Stanley Heller. I'll be speaking to Paul Hodel, President Emeritus of Promoting Enduring Peace. We'll be talking about Robert J. Lifton, the psychiatrist and author who passed away quite recently. Lifton wrote about the psychology of people in extreme situations, people who had committed atrocities and victims of those atrocities. As columnist and author M. Gessen wrote about him in the New York Times, he aimed to understand what the people on both sides of great tragedies, the victims and the perpetrators, thought and experienced. Good afternoon, Paul.
Hello, Stan.
So when did you first meet Robert J. Lifton?
I met Dr. Lifton in 1975 at a conference observing the 30th year since the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was a conference that was done to remember what had happened on those dates, and also to focus on how we could prevent future conflicts and nuclear war. And I was quite intrigued with it. I'd already been studying the Second World War and the tragedies of both Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the Nazi concentration camps. I'd heard about Lifton for years, just because of his research and his activism too. And I was thrilled to have the opportunity to go to this conference on the 30th year. It was both a conference to remember, but also to talk about what we could do to work for disarmament and a world at peace. This conference took place at Wilmington College in Ohio, which is a Quaker school that was dedicated to finding ways to remember conflicts and to find ways to resolve future struggles.
So he opened up your eyes to nuclear weapons and what they could do, etc.?
Yes, yeah, it was very important for me. I have to say that while I knew historical things, I did not know nearly enough about what the tragedy, what the horror of nuclear weapons. I was a young college student, and I'd heard the history, but really didn't understand nearly enough about what the consequences were, both for the victims, but also for those of us who were alive at that time, and the psychological, physical consequences of the threat of nuclear war, both for the victims in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but also the consequences for all human beings who are alive at this time, the real dangers that we faced psychologically and physically. It was quite revealing to me.
Now, was this the time of the nuclear freeze movement? Was he involved with that?
Lifton was very much involved with nuclear freeze campaign. Actually, the freeze campaign came a little bit after that. This conference was one of other things. The Vietnam War had just ended in 1975. And so many of us involved in the movement were thinking about what could we do for the future? What might we be able to do to make sure that there were no such terrible conflicts and war as had been witnessed in Vietnam. And Lifton, who'd already been active in the anti-war movement and having been influenced by his looking at consequences of wars in Korea and Japan, he wanted to see what we could do to prevent future such tragedies as those. And it was a great opportunity for me and many other activists to learn more about it. So this conference that took place, there were about 300 people or so there at this conference. It was an important event, and it was very important for me and for Lifton. One thing very important to say about Lifton was he was an author, he's a psychohistorian, but he's also quite an activist. He's very direct about it. All his vision and his work was directed to avoiding future such conflicts. He had a real vision of how we could hopefully be working together as a community here in the United States.
I understand. So he approached things, at least initially, from a psychological point of view, trying to figure out what was going on, and he came up with a couple terms that didn't become household vocabulary, but one was malignant normality. Now, that's an interesting one. Saying that, what people think is completely normal, when you look at it, it's malignant. Did I get that right?
You certainly did. And he was very direct about we're all psychological victims of this, and we become indoctrinated to the consequences of wars. And we become numbed to it, psychologically numb to it. And we hear about the numbers, the statistics. He talked about the evil, the moral evil of people, talking about wars in terms of how many people died. I remember, in fact, as a young person during Vietnam, I remember sometimes they'd have statistics every week. How many Vietnamese were killed? How many Americans were killed? It was just, and everything was in numbers. We find things in numbers. And there was even discussion, you probably remember this during the time of the Cuban Missile Crisis, when the whole world was on the brink of nuclear war at that time. There was discussion about how many Americans would die, how many Soviets would die, what the consequence was. And we were just numbed to it. We didn't think about it. We didn't think about what can we do to overcome it, but it's more just accepting that this might happen to us.
They had a term also, nuclear. I have a trouble with that word. Nuclearism.
Yes, psychosocial phenomenon that he was very aware of at the time. He'd observed it during the Second World War in responses to what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But then he took that concept and observed that's what's happening here in the United States, both in the United States, but in other parts of the world. The whole world, in a sense, had become numb to this. We didn't understand what the real dangers were and the ways in which we are numbed, psychologically numbed, and also politically numbed. And I think the word might be we're enslaved. We're enslaved psychologically, socially, politically. And I'm sorry to say, I think that's what's happening right now.
There's a pretty new book came out, I believe, last year by Annie Jacobson, a Pulitzer Prize winner. Simple title, Nuclear War. And she talks about a conference that occurred with essentially top military planners discussing what a nuclear war would be like. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but they're talking about, we could do this, and then there would be this retaliation and this and that. And we figure 600 million would be killed in the first day or week or something like that. And they're just talking like this. And she says, one person spoke against it. I don't remember his name, but the Marine commandant said, I don't go for this. And she says he said it, and then nobody responded, and it was like water off a duck's back, and they just went back to what they were talking about. And boy, is that an example of nuclearism, if there ever was one.
Yes. And again, it's mental, social, political enslavement that we just accept these numbers. And you may remember during the Cuban Missile Crisis, I remember vividly, I was in elementary school at 9 years old. I still remember talking about these numbers were being talked about on the media. You may remember it too, because you were young at that time. And you
I'm
remember
older than you. I was in high school, and we were it was like UN Day. I was in the marching band, and we were playing for this UN conference in Newark, New Jersey. And we had to stop because Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, came on and made his announcement about the blockade. And yeah, I certainly remember that time well. So Lifton was given the Gandhi Peace Award in '84. So were you involved with that?
I was on the board of promoting enduring peace at that time, and I already had met Dr. Lifton because we sponsored several conferences where he was a keynote resource speaker. Both the conference that took place with PSR, Physicians for Social Responsibility, and Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. And Lifton was a key resource person, speaker at that time.